Welcome to the Alex Salmond Show from College Green, just outside the House of Commons. This week, just about all other news has been overshadowed in the media maelstrom in the aftermath of the chemical poisoning in Salisbury. However, that doesn't mean that other important business hasn't been happening, just that it's gone largely unreported. One such event was a remarkable example of all-party cooperation, which allowed a private member's bill to make progress. This was Angus Brendan McNeill's Refugee Family Reunification Bill, named Refugees Family Reunion No. 2 Bill, which sailed through its first Commons test. This proposed legislation would allow unaccompanied young refugees who've already arrived in the UK to sponsor family members to join them, and also makes provision for legal aid to be made available in such cases. In this edition of the Alex Salmond Show, we devote the programme to this bill, consider its full implications and evaluate its chances of ultimate success. But first, over to Alex in the studio with your tweets, your emails and your messages.
Now, as you might imagine, there's been no shortage of commentary or tweets or emails or messages on last week's show. But interestingly, not just on the chemical poisoning in Salisbury. Anne, for example, highlights the interview with human rights campaigner Peter Tatchell, who she says leaves us in no doubt about what happens in Russia today. And the Peter Tatchell Foundation thanked us for the interview, including Peter's critique of Putin's human rights abuses against his own people. PC debates whether this can be editorially free. Why is Alex Salmond on a Russia TV show? Debate whether it's right or wrong, but actually why? You can't honestly tell me that Alec would be free to criticise Putin or the Russian government. Well, refer to the previous two tweets. Not just me, incidentally, but my guests as well are free to say what they think. Politics Scott says, I never really bothered watching the Alex Salmond Show, but thanks to the furore this week, I decided to give it a shot. It's now serious linked, so thanks for the heads up. And thanks to all our tweets and emails and messages. I think we can be certain that we'll be returning to the issue of the Salisbury poisoning as more evidence emerges from the OPCW, whose experts are now on the spot. Now back to the House of Commons, where last Friday, by a remarkable 129 votes to 42, Angus Brendan McNeill's Refugee Bill passed its second reading. Here are some of the highlights of that debate.
I beg to move that the Family Reunion Bill now be read a second time. The thing about this bill, Mr. Speaker, is that it really could have been introduced by any member in this House. It's a bill that's conceived by a partnership of Good Samaritan organisations, the British Red Cross, Oxfam, the Refugee Council, the UNHCR and Amnesty, to name but some. And this bill has the support of MPs from 7 political parties: Conservative, Labour, SNP, DUP, Liberal, Plaid Cymru and Green. So I want to thank honourable members right across the House who've co-sponsored the bill today. Members from across the House co-sponsored this. This shouldn't be a bill about party politics. It's not a bill about red, blue, yellow, whatever. It's about compassion, and as the honourable member from Orkney and Shetland said just a few moments ago, humanity as well.
Everybody perhaps forgets what and who a refugee is. This is somebody who is fleeing a place that they love, their home.
The House of Commons procedures make it extremely difficult to secure passage of a private member's bill. Usually, either the bill has to be non-controversial enough to attract government support, or it is stopped in its tracks. Indeed, that very thing happened to other measures only last Friday. However, Angus McNeill's bill on child refugees is not supported by the government, but it still struck a cross-party chord.
But when you see them together as a family unit, you see why they're motivated and why they contribute so positively to our community.
By making it easier, though, for a parent to join a child refugee, I would contend that this could incentivise families to send their child ahead on a perilous journey, often in the hands of unscrupulous people traffickers.
I presented a petition from 2 of my primary schools, St Patrick's and Simonton, in January, where they had done a project putting themselves in the position of being child refugees. They had drawn little suitcases with what they would take, what was most precious to them. And the thing that struck me was in every suitcase was a photograph of their family. We should be doing the same as them. And if we're a bit too old to imagine ourselves as children, can we imagine the help and support we would wish someone would give our children if they were in this circumstance?
One of the reasons that this bill attracted such cross-party support inside the chamber is that it had huge support outside Parliament. I spoke to Laura Padoan, spokesperson at UNHCR, one of the many humanitarian organisations who've been supporting the bill. Welcome to the Alex Salmond Show, Laura.
Thank you.
What have the UNHCR been doing then to actively garner support for the bill through Parliament?
Well, we decided to support this bill, firstly because refugees have told us that one of the key barriers to them really feeling settled and being able to integrate in the UK is this feeling that they've left close family members behind in either the country that they've come from or in refugee camps in the regions.
What is the government's view in relation to what's proposed in the bill, and why are they against it?
Well, the government's position is that the immigration rules can allow for refugees to bring family members, but that's only exceptional cases and then outside the rules. For us, that really doesn't provide enough of a safeguard for people who really are in need of bringing close family members. The current immigration rules are very restrictive. It's also a very complex procedure. So for us, it's really important to make those changes. What it would allow is for child refugees to be able to bring their parents to the UK. Now, at the moment, the UK is one of only 2 countries in Europe that doesn't allow children to bring their parents or their siblings. Now, children, child refugees are some of the most vulnerable people, and it really is absurd that they can't reunite with their parents, because all children do need that support, but refugee children in particular do need the help of their parents to be able to integrate. We also think that the definition of family under the current rules is very, very restrictive. At the moment, parents can bring their children up to the age of 18. So for us, the private members bill would allow a greater definition of family. It would allow parents to bring children over the age of 18 but under the age of 25, because a child doesn't stop being a child once they've reached 18. I think all parents would feel that they would want to reunite with their close family members. And especially for many refugee parents, if they've left an 18-year-old daughter, she could be in really precarious circumstances that would leave her very vulnerable. So for us, that was very important. And then thirdly and finally, the bill would bring back refugee family reunification under the scope of legal aid, because at the moment it can be very complicated and you do need really expert legal advice. So those are the 3 things that the bill seeks to do, and we think is really crucial for refugees to be able to integrate in the UK.
And I'd also heard during debate mention of bringing into legislation the family reunification bill would encourage, a situation I simply don't understand, encourage those to make that journey. And as we've heard so much testimony over many months, indeed years, unfortunately, in relation to particularly the Syrian crisis, what parent would anyway put their child in such a position of danger by suggesting they cross seas if that wasn't a safer option than staying where they were? So I think, and I'm sure you would agree, that this idea that it would encourage people to make the journey seems to me like a rather shallow argument to make. I mean,
currently we're facing the biggest levels of displacement that we've had since the Second World War. But actually in the UK, asylum numbers are dropping because it's so very difficult for asylum seekers and refugees to reach the UK. We do think there need to be safe legal routes so that people who are fleeing danger aren't putting their children's lives at risk, but that they can reunite safely. It took some time, I suppose, to get support from certainly some newspapers in relation to the refugee crisis, and unfortunately I think you remember it was the image of lovely little Aileen Curdy on the beach that got people into action to think we really need to do something about it, and that's part of the reason, I suppose, why we are where we are today. What does this mean, though, for refugees? You meet with refugees. What do you think this will mean for those young people, those who are far away from their family, for this legislation to become a reality? Well, I mean, the refugees I've spoke to, it would mean everything. I think for all of us, family is at the centre of our lives, and refugees are no different to anyone, really. For them to be able to rebuild their lives, to have close members of their family around them is so, so important. So it's not going to affect a huge number of people, but for the people whose lives it does affect, it would really mean the world.
What's the public perception? What's the feeling on the ground in relation to this particular bill? What's the sense that you get?
Well, we've had fantastic and overwhelming public support. Tens of thousands of people, constituents, have written to their MPs asking them to turn up to vote on a Friday and pass this legislation. We've had great support from high-profile celebrities, UNHCR Goodwill ambassadors like David Morrissey, like Neil Gaiman, actors like Gwendolyn Christie. We've had Vivienne Westwood, Alan Cumming, Peter Capaldi, who have all come out and supported this. How
much of an impact do you think celebrity, endorsement's probably the inappropriate word to use, but celebrities who then raise awareness in relation to issues has on the support for it, particularly public support?
Well, I think it has had a huge impact actually, because celebrities can use, their personal followings, their social media platforms to raise awareness of an issue which can be quite difficult to cut through. It's quite a technical legislative issue. So to use high-profile support that we've had from celebrities, it does actually motivate constituents to write to their MPs, and I think that has been really important in kind of having that momentum, raising awareness and encouraging MPs to stay and vote, and that's why we had such a fantastic turnout that we weren't really expecting, but was hugely welcome for so many MPs to stay and vote.
So you've got cross-agency work and you've got cross-parliament support.
Because I think what this shows is that it's a matter of principle, not politics, and this bringing refugee families together, it's about compassion, it's about humanity, and above all, it's about family. So that's not a political issue. I think everyone can relate to that.
So if I was an MP disinclined to be supportive of this legislation, what would you and HCR say to me to try and bring me on board?
I would say put yourself in the shoes of a refugee. I think everyone would want their family, close family members to be safe. I think that's what everyone wants. It's a really basic human instinct. This bill wouldn't seek to open the floodgates. It would just mean that for a very small number of refugees, they would be able to bring their adult children. Children would be able to bring their parents. These are people who have fled desperate circumstances, war, conflict, human rights abuses, and I think that we can be compassionate. We can offer a humanitarian, safe, legal route for people who have fled unimaginable dangers, and I think that I really hope that we can see this bill through to committee stage so that it does become a reality.
That's certainly an impassioned plea, almost as good as Angus Brendan McNeill's one. Can I ask you just before we finish, the situation in relation to unaccompanied children, do we have a sense at all of where they are in Europe, what numbers we're dealing with now?
Well, as we're reaching the summer months, then we're likely to see the number of boats crossing the Mediterranean increase. People are leaving Libya because, war is still forcing huge numbers of people from sub-Saharan Africa, conflicts in DR Congo, in Burundi, in South Sudan. People are fleeing these conflicts, so they will always try to seek a safer place. Also from Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan. The boats will keep arriving, and often parents do have to make a very difficult choice to put their children to make these dangerous journeys. So we are likely to see numbers increase of unaccompanied children who are arriving in Europe as we reach the summer months.
Finally, I just wanted to wind up to get an idea of where we are in the process. So we've got through one of the hurdles. It's going to committee stage now. So to give people watching it a timeline, what's next?
Well, we'll be meeting with MPs. There will be a committee. We hope to keep up the public pressure on the government to keep this at the forefront. And there will also be an immigration bill that we're expecting sometime, we don't know when, in the autumn. So we really hope that one way or the other, either through the private members bill or through the immigration bill, we will be able to make this law a reality.
Well, Laura, we wish you all the very best of luck with all the work that you do and all the agencies that you're doing to get this across the final hurdle. I think many people think it's absolutely the right thing to do. So thank you for all of your efforts, and thank you very much for joining us on the show.
Thank you.
Coming up after the break, we'll be hearing from the Member of Parliament behind the bill, Angus Brendan McNeill, MP.
Welcome back. And now I'm delighted to be joined by the Member of Parliament who's piloting this private member's bill, the Refugee Family Reunion Bill, through its stages in the Houses of Parliament. Welcome to the Alex Salmond Show, Angus Brendan McNeill.
Thank you very much, Alec. Great pleasure to be here indeed.
For the constituency of the Huon and Year, I was watching the proceedings in the Commons and one or two of the members had a little bit of difficulty with the Gaelic. How's mine?
It's very good. It's had a few years of practice, I have to admit.
Now, you've had a substantial achievement already, getting a bill, a private member's bill through second reading when it's not supported by the government. That doesn't happen very often. What do you attribute that success so far to?
Well, I think a number of people have come behind this. I mean, on the day we'd support from 5 political parties. The bill overall has support of 7 political parties. But really, this is a Good Samaritan bill. I mean, any member from any political party who's of goodwill could be piloting this bill through. Fortunately, I've been the one who's got into this situation who can take the bill forward. And we've got tremendous support from the UNHCR, the Refugee Council, the British Red Cross, Oxfam, Amnesty and a number of other good intentioned organisations.
You started your speech by talking about an example, which I thought was very powerful. This is Johannes, who you'd met from Canterbury. Tell us a bit about how he's affected by this bill and what his situation is.
Johannes has a very interesting backstory. He's a refugee who escaped from Eritrea. In Eritrea, he would have been conscripted into a very brutal military. We have refugees who have found themselves escaping Eritrea because older siblings have been press ganged and murdered. So Johannes went through Sudan, then he went with people traffickers across the Sahara, 2 weeks in the back of a lorry, 2 weeks in the back of a pickup. In the pickup, if they were warned if they fell out, that was them. They would have been left, and they were so tightly jammed in the pickup that they couldn't put their arms by their side. So that was the way they travelled for 2 weeks. And then it was from Tripoli in northern Libya, a boat across the Mediterranean before they were picked up by the Italian Navy. So Johannes, at that age, was 16. And I think he's shown remarkable determination in life, which is standing him in very good stead now. But Johannes, if this bill came through, would be able to sponsor his sister, who's now in a camp in Sudan, to come and join him.
He gets to sponsor, he's been granted a refugee status, and he would then get to bring a family member to this country as well.
So this would enable Johannes to have the same rights as an adult refugee and to sponsor family members to come with him rather than leave him alone and isolated. Incidentally, another side of it, it will allow adult refugees to bring children over the age of 18, because there are cases where some people have been able to bring their children under 18 with them, but not the children over 18.
So an adult who's been granted asylum, been classified as refugee, in fear of their life returning to their home country, they would be able to bring a child into this country.
As the law stands, yes.
As the law stands. But a child isn't able to bring an adult to accompany them into this country once they've been granted status.
That's absolutely the situation. And if anybody needs the support of a family, you would say more so the child than the adult. And it is a really strange and bizarre situation the UK's got this. And I think it laid a lie to the arguments that were made by some in the debate that this would be a pull factor. Because if
that means that some people are worried that well, just to take your example, that somebody from Ethiopia would smuggle their child into this country and then use that as a means of getting admittance themselves. Isn't there anything in that argument?
No, I think, firstly, if there was something in that argument, I think adults would be going en masse themselves. But they're not seeing this in any other European countries, that children are coming just to be an anchor child, as I think the term is. And I think it was best summed up by Lord Kerr of Kinlochaird in the House of Lords, when he said it'd be some Swiftian joke to imagine that you would gamble your child's life for a month across the Sahara in whatever sort of boat across the Mediterranean in the vain hope that you might find yourself in a European country.
But isn't there an argument that some people might put forward that you are effectively rewarding people for illegally getting themselves into this country?
I think you've got to remember these are refugees granted refugee status, and surely we've all got the right to a family life. And if somebody is a refugee, then they're here very legitimately for fear of their lives. And being here under fear of your life or under fear of whatever damage could possibly occur to you, you deserve to have rights. You don't deserve to be treated like a social leper. Why can adult refugees have rights to family, to sponsor family members to come, but child refugees of all people, child refugees, can't do that?
I mean, is this a case, as some people seem to suggest in the debate, that this might open up well, the floodgates is the usual term used?
And we've also got to remember that once we take the label refugees away from people, they're only refugees for a short period of their lives. You've got welders, you've got teachers, you've got nurses, you've got everything society needs arriving at an age when they're just beginning their productive lives. So, you know, if you wanted to be really mercenary about this, we should actually be looking for more people like this with the drive and the determination to cross the Sahara, to cross the Mediterranean. I certainly wouldn't have done that when I was 19 years old. I wouldn't do it now. So people like that, I think, are a great asset once they start to interact with society and interact with work and interact with people around about them.
So there was a lot of support for your bill. There had to be to get it through, but there was opposition as well, and moments of passion in the debate, which is quite surprising often in a private member's legislation, which often is totally non-controversial. Were you surprised at that interchange during your bill?
I was, and I think what surprised me most was the sort of the tabloid nature of some of it from people who should know better, people who didn't address the point about a child refugee getting the same rights as adult refugees, but who generally smeared and feared. You know, the raising of one refugee committing some act in some European city when there are 65 million refugees across the world. I mean, if a Scots person did something bad somewhere, or a UK person did bad somewhere, or a European did something bad somewhere, does that smear all Europeans, all UK people, all Scots? No. So why dredge up an example like that? And I think at the end of the day, that was seen for what it was.
Now, you're triumphantly through a second reading vote, but there's many obstacles still to come. So what happens now to your legislation, having got it through second reading? There's still a fair distance to travel.
Looking like it'll be 6 months' time before mine will get to committee. And then, of course, we've got another couple of stages in the House of Commons and got to go to the House of Lords as well.
Famously, Lord Dubs, 2 or 3 years back, had a huge success against the government's wishes. Himself, a child refugee from Nazi Germany in a kinder transport programme. That's the sort of member who you hope will come in behind your bill.
Absolutely, and the sort of member I expect will come behind the bill and has been around at some of the gatherings we've had around this bill. At the moment you bring refugees in, people seem to be all angsty about it. But then after a while, when people have integrated after a few months and a few years and are contributing to society, people are glad they've brought them in, whether they be welders or shopkeepers or doctors or whatever. There's been a huge societal dividend in just about every society in the West that's taken refugees, from Canada, across Europe, everywhere.
It's quite interesting. A special Holocaust Memorial Day edition of this show, I interviewed Freddie Nola, a survivor of the concentration camps, and just had an amazing 90-plus-year-old living and contributing to this country for so long, for the most astonishing life story. Do you like to think that if your bill is successful, or if the government makes a concession towards your bill at some appropriate stage, that the measure, although limited in nature, might actually be successful in saving someone from persecution or even death?
Yeah, and I think it will do that. And you know, Johannes' story, and having crossed the Sahara with people traffickers, knowing that the law in that empty desert is the end of the people traffickers' guns. To put it delicately, certainly doesn't want his sister to be travelling on that journey. So that stops him sleeping at night. So if you could change that situation and she could just travel safely, just get in an aircraft, show her papers and come over, she'd do that in a few hours, problem solved, and people's lives would be changed. And you know, what goes around comes around.
Now, this is a piece of legislation, but it's also a campaign. And you've been campaigning with these organisations supporting your bill, a wide range of organisations. How important is their actions outside Parliament to helping the progress of your legislation inside Parliament? Hugely.
I mean, I think the help of the UNHCR, the British Red Cross in particular, Oxfam, Amnesty, the Refugee Council have a massive impact and a huge push amongst the members, which gets you down to the public, and then the public in turn push MPs and make things happen. The support of actresses such as Julia Stevenson, Zassanine Boniadi, The Kaiser Chiefs, a number of people have come on board and have used their privileged position in a way to help others. Acknowledged privileged position has been very pleasing. But we do need, and we have to push further on the government. So one of the most gratifying things at the end of the bill was a young Tory researcher who came up to me and spoke to me in the corridors of the House of Commons after his MP had voted against me, to say his office and all the staff were on side with me and what we're trying to do and everybody else.
So in your legislation, in your campaign thus far, is there somebody you've met and experienced which has persuaded you you've got to drive on with this bill, with this legislation?
Yeah, absolutely. When after the vote on the bill in the House of Commons and the gallery, people started celebrating and clapping their hands, and you know, there's a bit of a hoo-ha that's unusual in the House of Commons.
Did the Speaker allow that?
I think they allowed about 2 or 3 seconds before they said we have to move on. But you know, there was an outpouring of genuine relief and happiness. But I met Johannes's girlfriend, a young lady from Sudan, and I had to explain to her and Johannes that this is only one of the stages of the bill, because you could have been misled for thinking at the moment of celebration that that was it was sorted. And to see her face to say you can't yet bring your family in from Sudan, you can't yet move on as we hope because there are so many other stages, you suddenly felt the pressure of we must deliver on this because there are now a lot of people whose hopes have been raised, and you don't want to dash those hopes, and they've just got hopes of normal people to be with their loved ones.
Angus McNeill, thank you so much for joining us on the Alex Salmond Show.
Great pleasure. Thanks a lot, Alec. Thank you.
In my time in the House of Commons, I saw many a great idea shot down in flames when it was introduced as a private member's bill. According to the conventional law of politics, the only way to have a good chance with a private bill is to make it so uncontentious that the government offer to shepherd it through themselves. Even some measures which have the tacit support of government can still be vulnerable to underhand parliamentary tactics like filibustering from a few last ditchers in the backbenches. Therefore, to get a bill not supported by the government through its second reading is no small matter. Now, as Angus McNeill accepts, he's very far from the home straight. Government opposition will likely still sink his bill in committee. However, where there's life, there is hope. And the campaign outside Parliament will be crucial in persuading the government to adopt the humanitarian course, to let right be done. From Taz and me and all at the Alex Salmond Show, goodbye for now.